Hello, I'm Dee, and this is Janice. During part 2 of this Girl Scouts Heart of Michigan program, you will discover ways you can connect with the history and legacy of Juneteenth, as well as how to earn a patch.
In 1865, the 13th Amendment, which made slavery illegal, was voted into the Constitution. Juneteenth, also known as Independence Day for African Americans, marks the day the last plantation located in Galveston, Texas, heard about the end of slavery.
We celebrate Juneteenth because it honors our African American ancestors who survived the institution of slavery and shows pride in the legacy of resistance and perseverance they left us. Juneteenth is an African American celebration of family, freedom, and education.
Slavery ended. So what did that really mean? For the first time, the United States had laws protecting the rights of African Americans. This includes the right to travel freely, the right to an education, the right to form organizations, and the right to gather and worship in public. What does freedom mean to you? African Americans celebrated their freedom by building their own communities. They created many social and community groups, such as churches, professional organizations, and schools, to help promote businesses, the arts, and education. Some of these organizations are still active today.
Even now, America still struggles to define what freedom means. But over the years, African Americans have constantly and consistently created new visions of freedom that have benefited all Americans. In the beginning, many slaves claimed their freedom by immediately leaving the plantations. Some left with nothing but the clothes on their backs and hope in their hearts.
How do people build community? African Americans created their own communities in order to encourage and support each other, despite the turmoil around them. Our nation was changed because of these struggles.
How do Girl Scouts build community? We can build community through volunteerism, service projects, and following the Girl Scout promise and law.
Adjusting to freedom. The Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1876. In March of 1865, Congress created the Freedmen's Bureau to help Black and poor white Southerners adjust to living on their own. The Freedmen's Bureau provided food and clothing, built schools, and created jobs.
Barriers to freedom. The era of segregation, many Southern state and local governments passed a collection of laws that legalized racial segregation and anti-Black racism, known as Jim Crow laws. These laws made it harder for African Americans to vote, work, get an education, and even gather with friends and family.
Jim Crow was a time when the nation struggled to define the status of African Americans as individuals, while institutions worked to take away their rights as citizens.
Civil rights movement. The struggle is real. Some of the more well-known civil rights protests include the Montgomery bus boycotts from 1955 to 1956, the 1960 sit-ins in North Carolina and Tennessee, the 1963 March on Washington. How did the March on Washington impact society? The March on Washington helped create a new national understanding of the problems of racial and economic injustice. It brought together demonstrators from around the country to share their experiences with labor discrimination and state-sponsored racism.
When did segregation end? In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, which legally ended segregation institutionalized by the Jim Crow laws.
The end of legal segregation represents an important time for the United States and for African Americans.
The triumph over Jim Crow is but one victory we celebrate on Juneteenth.
In order to create a peaceful world, we must learn to practice love and respect toward each other in our thoughts, words, and day-to-day behavior.
The George Floyd protests began as part of an international response against police brutality and racism in the United States. You may have seen nonviolent acts like these on television or where you live, or perhaps you participated in a march last year. How can a Girl Scout use her voice to advocate for herself and others? How do Girl Scouts practice nonviolence? Read the Girl Scout law. Think about why it is important to stand up for yourself and others.
African American leaders. African Americans who dared to challenge segregation faced arrest and violence. Through the years, and even today, millions of Black Americans and their allies have participated in protests against racism and segregation. Girl Scouts live a life of courage and help make the world a better place. Choose 2 things you can do this week to promote an understanding and appreciation of individual, cultural, religious, and/or racial differences.
Dee and I are happy you joined us. We invite you to look around your community to find other ways you can join the fun and celebrate Juneteenth. Now that you've learned a little more, you're welcome to purchase a patch from Girl Scouts Heart of Michigan. Be sure to look for Juneteenth video Part 3.